definitely makes you feel a lot better, the fact that you know if you tag something for the IDVA service that victim is going to get immediate help from the IDVA, and things can be put in place such as non-molestation orders they can be applied for. We can do things at scene such as change locks to obviously keep people safe, but when the IDVA's there, they have a whole range of a toolkit which we don't have access to as the police.
When I was a younger person, drink driving wasn't like it is now. People are all shocked at drink driving. They go, oh, drink driving, that's terrible. I want the same to be said about domestic abuse, and we're still not there yet. It's a subject that's not really talked about.
It felt like I was living a nightmare. It didn't feel real at the time. Looking back, it's just horrendous now. And until you talk to someone about it, you don't realise the extent of what you went through at the time. Frightened, scared, didn't want to go home. Was I safe at home? Your home's meant to be a safe place, isn't it? Just upset, didn't know what was going to happen next. Worried about what would happen to the other person, even though I should have been worried about myself. Worried about what other people would think about me, feeling embarrassed. Couldn't believe I was in this situation, having never had any contact with the police before. I was then sat in a police car trying to explain what had gone on that evening, and it was very overwhelming. But the police were amazing. The service I received was amazing, and the support since then.
Every shift we get a police officer to work with for the whole shift, and we're embedded in the shift because we go to the briefing at the beginning of the tour, or whatever the police call it. So we're embedded in the shift, and we get given jobs, revisits to do. We've seen 1,000 victims, not me personally, but I've seen a lot. I've only been turned away twice in the whole time I've worked here by a victim that don't want to speak to me. I think the NHS lanyard's got a lot to do with it, and not being in uniform's got a lot to do with it. And because I'm a very experienced practitioner at 30, I'm quite good at talking, and I've got a good way people say about me. Sometimes I ring first before I come, sometimes just go knocking on the door, and it's the way we are with people. And I always say we're guests in their home, and we have to treat it as that. And I find that a lot of time, especially when the offender's in custody, that they're sat at home worrying what's happening, where is he? Because you can't constantly keep ringing up because they haven't got the phone anyway. Possibly hungover because they've had a drink, they argue because they've had a drink, and they're so grateful to us to go and explain what's going to happen now, what do they want to happen now, and that is the key. My first question when we get properly talking is, what would you like to happen now? And often it's not, I want to make a statement, I want to this and this, I want to go to refuge. It's not about that. It's usually about, can you help me get him out? Or I want him to leave, I don't want him to leave me alone. And we can help with that by working with other agencies like Women's Aid or Victim Services.
Constant messages, phone calls by an ex-partner, emails. I'd blocked all that type of communication. Then it started going on to social media platforms, constant messages on there. When I blocked that, it then started with physical contact, turning up to my house, knocking on the door, putting his head through my kitchen window when it was open, shouting verbal abuse to answer the door, I want to speak to you, I need to see you. And then after that, it started with being outside my house, waiting for me in the night with his coat on, his hood up, shouting my name. When I came out of my property, I was going to a friend's house, ironically, to report what had been going on. And this individual was waiting outside of my house. At the time, I didn't know what to do, so I ran back to my car, to get into my car, place of safety. And when I looked around, this person had run off. I had no idea where he'd gone. As I drove out of my housing development, he came out of nowhere, lights on, bumper to bumper with my car, followed me up the road. He followed me around a main roundabout near a motorway. I did go through a red light initially to get away from him, and he continued to follow me 4 times around that roundabout. It didn't leave me alone, and I thought, what do I do? I was in a situation where I thought, do I ring the police now, or do I try and find someone to help? I knew that there was a petrol station down the road. Went into there, drove into there, and thankfully there was a police car parked up, and I ran inside to my guardian angels. They were literally at the right place at the right time. And if it wasn't for them, I don't know what would have happened.
Yeah, it's definitely aided in prosecutions because I personally, I've been to jobs with Michelle and the victim initially hasn't wanted to give a statement, so I've asked for the IDVA to attend with the police officer, and Michelle's attended. I've stepped outside, Michelle's had a conversation with the victim, and the victim has essentially then wanted to give a statement after a short conversation with Michelle about how support can be put in place through Women's Aid, and obviously through having a permanent IDVA who will even attend court with the victim to give them help. And obviously putting that reassurance in place has allowed the victim to give me a statement so I could get prosecutions.
She was very friendly. She could see how scared and frightened I was. I'd literally been chased out of my house, drove erratically for a few minutes, and then I ran into a petrol station asking for help. She could see something was wrong, so she made me wait inside, and then she went out to sort the individual out, and then she asked me to sit in her car, and we discussed a few questions, and she could tell it wasn't just a one-off. It had been going on for a while, and she was so lovely, and she didn't doubt what I was saying, so I knew that she believed in me, which is huge, isn't it? Which is why I opened up and told her what had been going on.
Yeah, you can see it in their eyes when you talk about controlling coercive behaviour, because like I say, it's not all about physical stuff. It often is with the police involved, but when you go down to the nuts and bolts, if you will, and talking about the relationship, because I always say, tell me a bit about your relationship. I've never met one yet that hasn't had an element of coercive control involved, even though it might be physical. One that stands out to me, it wasn't with Lauren, it was another police officer. Ambulance had come through to comms and said, is somebody from Op Provide, because I know where health. I've got a woman in the middle of Blackpool that won't get in the ambulance. She's got a really severe facial injury. It's coming towards the end of my shift. It was an afternoon when we were in lockdown last summer. So me and the police officer went to the ambulance, and the ambulance didn't warn me of this woman's facial injury. I used to work in the ED many years ago. When they opened the side door of the ambulance, I actually took a gasp. This woman's face, she had a piercing, but it was so disfigured where it kicked her. It actually kicked her around the head in the street in the middle of Blackpool in broad daylight, and nobody members of the public would help. But she was so worried about going to A&E because she was worried about what questions people ask, because that's another thing. A lot of victims, Lauren will agree, don't often want to go to hospital because they're worried that other health professionals start asking questions. But what I did, I got in the ambulance with her, calmed her down. I phoned one of my colleagues on the safeguarding team who I work for and said, this woman's coming in, will you meet her at the door and guide her through what's going to happen? And that's how we got her into hospital. I went back to see her the next day and she gave a statement. And I genuinely think if we weren't here, that wouldn't have happened. I don't think they'd have got she hadn't got a serious injury, just swollen, but we needed to find out what was wrong with her face. So I think that incident, if we hadn't gone, I don't know, well, she definitely wouldn't have gone to hospital.
It made me feel, is this normal? Is this okay to be like this? And it's not, is it? Looking back, you know it's not. And at the time, you know it's not, but you're in a position where you don't want to cause any more. I'm not into drama or anything like that, so I was like, no, I'll leave it, it'll be fine, it'll go away. But the more you push it under the carpet, the more it just builds up, doesn't it?
And we get a lot of victims that might start off with a surgery appointment with the police and say, this man or woman or me won't leave me alone. And that's where I think it's more dangerous, when they've lost control and it's like almost like a red mist comes down and they can't stop. Once you got up in the morning, I'm not joking, he'd painted all the downstairs windows with red paint so you couldn't see out of the windows. He'd gone in the night and done it while she was in bed. That's the kind of lengths that people will go to, I don't know if it's to get them back or to get attention, but I think it's all about when they've lost control, and that's when they're the victims that are most at risk.
But we've even had ex-partners that have put like tracking devices on people's cars. Like, it's just very, very strange. Once you finished a relationship with somebody, if you don't want to be with them, like this person completely, they'd moved on, and they were in a relationship with somebody else, but I couldn't understand why you'd put tracking device on people. But there's quite a lot of jobs like that, isn't there now, Michelle, where people are doing stuff like that?
Now I feel like I want to educate others, because it's not right, and it needs to stop, and especially females at the moment, they're vulnerable, aren't they? There's a lot of media around how females act in public, the attention they get in public, what they wear. However, regardless of that, no one deserves to be harassed or stalked by a partner or someone that they know. So at the moment I'm still recovering from the whole process because it's still quite new. However, I don't feel embarrassed anymore because I didn't ask to be put in this position. I was forced into this position, and obviously until I spoke up, that's when things started to change. So until you speak up, things won't change, things won't get better. It's vital that you speak up, and the police are there to support you all the way.
Please just don't be scared. There is support and protection available to help you and guide you through the process of prosecution. At the end of the day, there's IDFA support, there's support through Women's Aid, and don't be scared, because that is all there and it can all be put in place pretty soon.